Hey, April 29th, Saturday morning, just getting back from the gym. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Alex Grover, a CEO and co-founder of Restack AI. And today I want to talk about a question I get a lot, like why do a lot of Web3 projects fail and why people should hire our firm. And it comes down to one word, management. Ability to lead projects, make decisions during the project, plan the projects. Management, it's one of the most underrated skill sets probably out there in the software business. Everyone thinks that managers are just people who don't code and they don't do anything. They just move, Jira tickets across the board. But there's a lot more to it. I mean, when you see projects that are run all by developers, it gets very hard, very quickly. Very hard, very fast, or very quickly for them to decide what to do, what should go first, what has business importance. A lot of developers are quite idealistic and don't have the commercial experience, and they get into a perfectionist trap. I've seen this in like developer-run companies where they don't want to release anything and then they end up missing the market. But so you've got to get something out there, and that's what management does, makes those decisions. But I want to back up a little bit and talk about like some analogies about management. So you have two countries, you have Russia and Japan, and so Russia has all these resources, and they actually have quite a few engineering PhDs, and they have a lot. They have a lot of land, natural resources, universities, engineers. And Japan has very little land. I mean, there's quite a technical workforce in Japan. But what sets the countries apart is management. Now, like I said, Japan has no natural resources, so they became a manufacturing country. And how did they do this? They had to make decisions like where to buy the steel, make the steel technology, and then they come up with all this robotics and et cetera, et cetera. So there's a considerable amount of decision making and management there. And Japan puts actually a high value on management. There was this American engineer, Richard Deming, and he was chased out of the US, and the Toyota picked him up. And he was kind of the father of Toyota's management system. But a lot of these management methodologies and everything like Six Sigma, Lean, a lot of this was born out of Japan, a combination of the US and Japan, to get things better, to continuously improve. But there's always like decisions taking place, like what you'll release when, how to prioritize, who's going to work on what. And if you don't have this decision maker, a strong one in place, your project is going to fail because everyone starts working on everything, and then it just becomes a gaggle. And we've seen this a lot in Web3, that you just have a bunch of guys get together, and a lot of them are really solid in marketing. They have an image, and then they have like maybe one or two developers, or they contract a company in Ukraine. There's one project Awakened. They contracted some people in Ukraine, but they really didn't know how to manage them, and the project ran away from them. They didn't have someone in there in the middle between the visionary and between the developers to make those decisions, what goes out first. Usually you release an MVP, just some minimum thing that people can start playing with and chew on a little bit, and then every 2 weeks you put out something new. And that's where the decision making takes place. There's a backlog. You have limited resources against unlimited demands, and making that decision, it seems easy. It seems really easy, and it seems like, okay, that would be obvious, but it's not. There's like a lot of times there's nuance, and if you rush things out, then you have to do rework. So you have to really, like I said, management, and that's where Restack excels. We deliver early, we deliver within the budgets, and we are delivering early because we know how to scope a project. We know how to take an idea and break it down into what's called user stories, or components, standalone components. I'll use more generic language than the Agile speak. But essentially you have a system, and then you want to break it down into self-standing components. It's like the service-oriented architecture, which gets like a group of apps. You're taking data from different places and making them work together. So you have to define all of that, and there has to be a lot of time spent on planning. It's like when I renovated my apartment, I actually envisioned almost every step, like what would take place. And it's just, of course, like projects fail also because people do over planning, and then by the time they finish a project, it's not what people expected. So that's why I always suggest the Agile approach, that every 2 weeks you're having a checkpoint with your consumer or your customer to make sure you're on track. And that's why you break things down, so you can always go back and your rework track won't be so big if you have to reiterate. So again, that's something a skilled manager would know, because what you see a lot of times when it's like pure marketers, they want to, they'll say, okay, we'll just find a company in India or Ukraine and we'll subcontract and we'll give them a bunch of money and just tell them vaguely what we want and they'll get it. Of course they understand your vision. Of course they known you all your life and they understand what you want. No, they understand how to code. They understand like how to take a user story and, you got to put conditions on like what makes it successful, like a test. How do you test that component, or how do you test that story? Like, brakes on a bicycle are a component. And how do you know it works? Well, when you pull the lever, the clamps squeeze on the wheel and the wheel stops. And you have to spell that all out for people when you're working with subcontractors. You have to, if you're going to do that, you have to really have a good handle on your system or your app and the components and how each component's going to work. If you hand it off to a company and you want them to do the strategic consulting and you don't have a strong manager on your side to keep it on track and to push back, because they will try to run over you. It's just natural. They start trying to fill in the void with their own perspective. You get yourself in a lot of trouble. And I've seen that. Like I said, this is why 95% of Web3 projects fail. They don't have the right person between the visionaries and the marketing team and the people who are coming up with the story and the development team who's supposed to deliver it. And it gets over, they start drowning. And this is where we excel. Like my partner and I each have 25 plus years experience. Now, like I'm a manager that understands development, and he's a developer that understands management, and he has vision. He understands the vision of the product. And so people are always like complaining like, well, he costs a lot. Well, of course, because he's doing like 3 or 4 people's job. He's doing the business analyst job. He's doing the visionary's job, to get inside the visionary's head and comprehend that vision. So, but that's why we deliver ahead too, and it actually becomes more worthwhile when you work with us. And we're able to now also work with others, so we can delegate the work. We can spec out the tasks, give very clear specifications and keep very good control on the people who we subcontract to. So we're like general contractors. I mean, we can do a lot of the handiwork. Actually, we can do all of it if you give us enough time, but some projects require 4 or 5 people. But then we're in control. We are definitely in control of what we're doing. And so that's what you're hiring when you're hiring Restack, is you're hiring our management skills as well as our architecture skills. My business partner can design a system and he can architect it and he can understand the vision, and I can deliver it in components, and then I can act as a sparring partner, to make sure it tests. You got to have opposition in the team. We've got some pretty good arguments going on. It's like that father and son show with the motorcycles, that Orange Coast Choppers or whatever, that show out of New Jersey that used to be a long time ago with that. You got to have that too. If everyone is getting along too well and everyone is agreeing, then it's probably not a really good idea. So you have to have some sparring, because the idea has to be bulletproofed. There has to be some opposition to test the ideas in the lab before you put it out there in the real world, and invest all this tens of thousands of dollars in marketing, and you find out someone else has already done it before or no one else wants it. So that's what you're hiring when you hire Restack, and that's why management is important. And we use a mixed methodology approach. We're not religious about Agile, but we definitely tend to lean on Agile. And the way we do Agile also incorporates Lean Six Sigma, that there's measurable outcomes. We are very numbers oriented. We are very much defining our user stories or our component stories or component tasks in a way that can be measured, in a way that's, that it's done. What else do we incorporate? Of course, everything is waterfall. We can't say that Waterfall is bad. Just Agile is a way that you do Waterfall a different way. That, you know, you have checkpoints every 2 weeks, and, you know, you're having visibility on the project. I mean, every project needs a roadmap, needs a starting point, and needs a goal, like what you're trying to achieve at the end. And that's what Waterfall is. Like, you know, when you're building a house, you know, you start out by laying a foundation, then you put up the framing, you know, you put down the floors, you know, you put on a roof, you know, not necessarily in that order, but that's something you define. And, you know, one depends on another. There is that in Agile too. Don't get it wrong. You know, sometimes one thing has to be done before another thing. So otherwise, again, if you do Agile without the proper roadmap and proper waterfall, you might build one component too early, you know, and another one should have been built in advance, and then you end up having to do that work again anyway. And, you know, 70% of projects don't make it on time. And again, it's because of poor planning, unexpected surprises. You know, it's just like when you're remodeling a house, you open up a wall, you think you're just going to put in a new sink, and then you find out all the plumbing is old, and then you got to replace all the plumbing. So this is inevitable. This happens in projects. But what Agile does is it lowers the risk by having 2-week iterations and very clear deliveries, you know, for those 2 weeks. And then you have a chance to go rework things without getting too invested. Or if you have like long, like you build a house and then you build it all wrong, you know. You know, I mean, building a house is pretty well defined science, but software, you know, usually sometimes when you're building something, it's completely new. It has been done before, but it's under IP, and so you're kind of guessing what they did. But in general, like, I guess home building in a sense, you know, you can look up online that what goes first, what goes second. Like, do you put the roof on before you know, put up the floors? Generally, you put up the foundation, the framing, the roof, then you close it up, and then you do the floors, you know, so that way the weather doesn't destroy it. But anyhow, like software, you have to kind of, so you go 2 weeks and then you test it out and then you say, okay, now what do we build? What are we going to do for the next 2 weeks? What are the dependencies? How is this getting us closer to our end goal of the app doing these things? Like, you have a whole list of features, and, you know, you're basically rolling out like a few features at a time. Like, you know, login screen, look at what's in your wallet, you know, and then you have a basic game, like you can enter a game, but maybe the gameplay right now isn't working, but at least you can get in. And then 2 weeks later, there's some rudimentary play, and 2 weeks later, the gameplay improves. Something like this. But you have to decide, you know, this is just a high level. You have to decide what elements go, and that there's not dependency. And I think one of the hardest things for a manager is to map these dependencies, and so to avoid the rework. That's where, and also the outside dependencies. Like, I was on a project, they wanted to build a marketplace, like a blockchain marketplace, and the blockchain wasn't ready, you know, so that was just a disaster waiting to happen, because, you know, the blockchain is like what if it doesn't work the way it's expected? Then you have to change like a lot of code and everything, because they wanted to run a lot of this on the chain. You know, if it was off chain, then it's a lot less risky. You can just build it on a different chain that's already working, and then just do some adjustments when you change over, you know, and at least that way you can roll back to something working on like Polygon or Solana, or, you know, just some, before you roll it out on your own. But these are things that managers think about. Like I said, it's just developers, they're going deep. They're going deep into technology. They are very specialized in the code and making it work, making sure it's secure, tested. You have to give them a specification. It's a bit, if you have a guy, you know, who's supposed to know all the coding, and then you're supposed to also ask him to develop the specification, that's where you get in trouble. That's not what they do. They kind of need that. It's like a team. You know, it's like a basketball team. You know, you have a center, you have a point guard. Everyone is shooting for the baskets, but different people have different specialties. Or like football, like quarterback and running backs and all of this. So it's like that. It's like a tribe or something where everyone, or like a special forces team where everyone has like a medic, and you have a sniper, and you know, you have a team leader. You know, I mean, the military found it worthwhile to have team leaders. I don't know why people bash the military culture, because it actually works. You know, when they're given the right mission and the right goals and the right objective, they actually do a pretty good job of getting it. So And then you have managers there making decisions, if things go wrong, where to reallocate and move people around. So you need a strong decision maker in the process. You need someone who understands the customer requirements, understands the commercial value. And this is a skill by itself. This is not something the developer, who's staying on the cusp of technology and having to learn new things because they always change. They're spending their time learning the latest JavaScript libraries, learning the latest back-end languages, learning the latest cloud stuff. That's what they know. And they can talk to you about, well, there's a better way to do this approach to solve this problem. That you want to build an app that fetches data or something, and they say, well, now this does it faster. This uses less lines of code. This is easier, more transferable. That's the kind of stuff they can tell you. They're not going to tell you if your idea is good or bad. They want to execute. They're people who execute, and a manager has to come with a vision. Has to have the visionary's vision in mind. They are taking what the owner of the company envisions and putting it into digestible pieces that can be carried out, and then the coders actually execute this, from well-defined specifications. It's like the builders, the people building your house. They're not designing your house generally. I mean, you'll have an architect maybe in the same company who's made the plans, but the guy who's actually putting up the roof and the plan, he's concerned about, nailing down the roof properly, or he's concerned about pouring the concrete, and he knows everything about the concrete to make sure there's no bubbles in it, enough rocks are in it, and what's the best way to do that concrete. But he needs a guidance on how to do it, like where to pour this foundation, how high it should be. That has to all be spec'd out for him. And like I said, this is the big missing piece in Web3 projects. You have a bunch of kids, they think they can do everything without a manager, that everything is cool now, blockchain, decentralized, woohoo, everyone's going to be rich off of tokens, and I just have to build something and grab a bunch of money, and I don't have to show any, it's herein lies the problem, that you cannot bypass nature. I mean, even the human body, right? We have a brain, and the brain tells the eyes and the feet and the arms and the legs and what to do. And then you have like the stomach processes run in the background like a batch job, just like computer jobs at the bank, so even nature has like a management mechanisms in place, but that's all I got for today. Restack School of Management. If your project is in trouble, or you need some guidance on how to run the project and how to break down the work and what should go out first, what should go out second, give us a call and we'll gladly help you out.